first World Series between the National League, founded in 1876, and the young upstart American League, who played their first season in 1901. The first series was played as a best-of-9 series, which is too many games. The World Series was a suggestion of Pittsburgh Pirates owner Barney Dreyfuss, so a shout-out to Mr. Dreyfuss on behalf of all us guys with baseball hyperfixation-style autism. The Pittsburgh Pirates had won the National League pennant the previous 2 years in 1901 and 1902. They were coming into the series hampered by injuries, including injuries to star shortstop Honus Wagner and pitcher Sam Lever. Their pitching staff was further reduced when pitcher Ed Doheny developed paranoia and had to be institutionalized. He would never pitch again. That's not good. Game 1 was played in Boston at the Huntington Avenue baseball grounds in front of 16,000 people. The pitching matchup for the day featured Boston's legendary Cy Young versus Pittsburgh's Deacon Phillippe. And we got action right away in the first inning as Cy Young gets rocked for 4 runs after getting 2 easy outs. Tommy Leach got the first hit in World Series history with a triple and was driven in shortly after by Honus Wagner with the first RBI in World Series history. Another first for Honus Wagner is he gets the first stolen base in World Series history immediately after knocking in that first run. The Pirates' big first baseman Kitty Bransfield gets on base after an error by the American second baseman, and he steals another base and then scores on an error on the throw from Boston's catcher Lou Krieger, so we're already off to a sloppy start. After a walk and a third stolen base by the Pirates, 2 more runs come home on a single by rookie outfielder Jimmy Sebring. We get another error by Boston's catcher that advances the runners, but no more runs score, and Deacon Phillippe strikes out to end the inning before he even gets to throw a pitch for the Pirates. It's 4-0 Pittsburgh going into the bottom of the first. In the Pirates' half of the third, Kitty Bransfield hits a triple, and he comes home on a single by catcher Ed Phelps, 5-0 Pittsburgh. The Pirates get another run in the fourth inning. Ginger Beaumont reaches on the second error of the game by Boston's second baseman Hobie Ferris, and then comes home after singles by Fred Clark and Tommy Leach. The score's 6-0, and things are not looking good for the Boston home crowd. The Pirates pile another run on in the 7th inning with the first home run in World Series history. Inside the park home run by rookie outfielder Jimmy Sebring, 7-0 Pirates. Boston scores for the first time in the bottom of the 7th with triples by Buck Freeman and Freddie Parent, leading to the first Boston run. The Americans get a second run, courtesy of Candy LaChance and his huge mustache. It's 7-2 Pittsburgh going into the 8th inning. The Boston Americans made one last effort at the bottom of the 9th. Buck Freeman reached on an error by shortstop Honus Wagner and then scored after a sequence of 2 base hits with a sacrifice fly in between. The score is now 7-3. Boston has 2 runners on and 1 out, but Deacon Phillippe gets the last 2 batters out, and Pittsburgh wins the first ever World Series game 7-3. Deacon Phillippe pitches 6 scoreless innings before giving up his first run. Quite an outing. 6 errors combined by both teams makes for a wild and sloppy World Series game in Boston, and the Pittsburgh Pirates are up in the series 1-0. Game 2 of the first ever World Series, 1903, Boston, Massachusetts, Huntington Avenue baseball grounds. The Pittsburgh Pirates up 1-0 on the Boston Americans. The home crowd attendance was down from over 16,000 in Game 1 to less than 9,500. The American League fans not sure the Junior League has a chance in the series. The pitching matchup for the day featured future umpire Bill Dineen for Boston, while Pittsburgh put up Sam Lever. Lever had injured his pitching shoulder in a trap shooting competition prior to the series, so he was coming into this at less than 100%. It seems like a kind of a dumb choice to get into that if you're a pitcher. Top of the first inning, Bill Dineen picks off Pirates manager Fred Clark at first base after a walk and faces only 3 batters in the inning. Big Bill Dineen looking pretty shifty there. I'm not sure about this guy. But in the Boston half of the first, Boston's leadoff hitter, Patsy Doherty, fired a drive into deep right center for an inside-the-park home run. Lever managed to get 1 out before giving up a double to Chick Stahl, who then scored on a single by Buck Freeman. It's 2-0 Boston, and the Americans have their first lead of the series. In the second inning, Pirates manager Fred Clark has apparently seen enough of the struggling Sam Lever and brings in pitcher Bucky Vail in relief, who will finish the game. Both pitchers keep it pretty quiet until the 4th inning when Ginger Beaumont leads off with a walk and advances on a Fred Clark single. Both runners move up on a fielder's choice, but the potential Pirates rally is squashed when Honus Wagner lines it into an unassisted double play at second base by Hobie Ferris. Boston manages to load the bases in the 5th after a single, a walk, and a fielding error, but Bucky Vail gets out of the jam after a force out at home plate on a ground ball, and then a double play ends the inning with no runs scored. Patsy Doherty leads off the 6th with his second home run of the game, this time to deep left. It's now 3-0 Boston. The Americans aren't able to capitalize for any additional runs, however, despite third baseman and manager Jimmy Collins walking and stealing second and advancing to third on a bad throw by catcher Ed Phelps. And then only 1 hit for the rest of the game for the Pirates as Big Bill Dineen puts them down 1-2-3 in the top of the 9th. 9th. Boston wins the game too, 3-0. The Boston Americans pitcher Bill Dineen with a 3-hit shutout, only 2 walks and 11 strikeouts to put a nice record in place for the World Series right there at the beginning. Patsy Doherty with 2 home runs, 1 in and 1 out of the park, it looks like. First time anyone does that in the World Series. Bucky Vail, after coming in relief, allows only 1 run on 5 hits, 4 walks, not bad. So the series is tied at 1, going into Game 3, the last game in Boston before they head to Pittsburgh for the next 4 games. Game 3 of the 1903 World Series, the first one at Huntington Avenue Baseball Grounds in Boston. Boston Americans and Pittsburgh Pirates coming into this tied at 1 game each. After the Boston win in Game 2, the attendance at Game 3 doubled the attendance of the previous one. The crowd was in overflow as the fences and benches were blocked by fans. Police were brought in to control the crowd, and there was only 50 feet behind home plate, so this place was absolutely packed for this game. Due to the overflow crowd, ground rules had to be established for balls hit into the outfield and into the crowd, so any hit that disappeared into that crowd was ruled a double. So we're playing under some strange circumstances here. The pitching matchup for the day was Pittsburgh's Deacon Phillippe, starting his second game of the series, and long Tom Hughes for the Red Sox, Americans. The scoring started in the Pittsburgh half of the second when Claude Ritchie hit a ground rule double. Jimmy Sebring took a walk, and catcher Ed Phelps followed with yet another ground rule double to make the score Pittsburgh 1, Boston 0. Oh, they managed to get most of him on the baseball card. That's good. The Pittsburgh half of the third inning was pretty wild. After a walk to Ginger Beaumont, a ground rule double by Fred Clark, and an RBI single by Tommy Leach, the score was 2-0 Pittsburgh, and Boston manager Jimmy Collins decided to give Tom Hughes the hook. Brought in to replace Hughes was Cy Young, who was supposedly still in his street clothes, so Collins had to argue with the umpires for a little bit to buy him some time to change. Young started off his appearance by hitting Hannes Wagner with a pitch to load the bases, but then he got a pop-up in a fielder's choice at home plate for 2 outs. But he didn't get out of the inning unscathed, not quite, as another run scored on an error by Boston shortstop Freddie Parent. A 4th run was prevented when Hannes Wagner was tagged out at home plate to end the inning. It's now Pittsburgh 3, Boston 0. Boston gets a run in the 4th inning after Jimmy Collins singles and Chick Stahl walked. The runners moved up on a fielder's choice, and then Freddie Parent with a sacrifice fly brought home the first Boston run. Pittsburgh 3, Boston 1. There were no hits from the 5th to the 7th inning, but Pittsburgh increased its lead in the 8th inning 4-1 after a Hannes Wagner ground rule double, an error by Cy Young that allowed Kitty Bransfield to reach first, and an RBI single by Claude Ritchie. Boston fought back in their half of the 8th when Jimmy Collins hit a ground rule double, another one, and Chick Stahl drove him in with a single to make the score Pittsburgh 4, Boston 2, but that was all the runs Boston was going to get. Pittsburgh took Game 3, 4-2. Deacon Phillippe with a command performance, 4 hits, 2 runs, only 3 walks, 6 strikeouts. But with the overflow crowd affecting play, 7 ground rule doubles, 3 fielding errors. It made for a pretty sloppy and overall low-scoring game. 7 ground rule doubles, wow. Just wait till we get to Pittsburgh, though. Just wait. So the Pittsburgh Pirates take the lead in the series, 2-1, heading into Game 4 for the first game in Pittsburgh. Game 4 of the 1903 World Series at Exposition Park in Pittsburgh. This game was played in front of a relatively small crowd of only 7,600. The Pirates came into this game leading the series 2-1 over the Boston Americans. The starting pitchers for the day were Bill Dineen for the Boston Americans, making his second start of the series, and Deacon Phillippe for the Pirates, making his third start. After the first 3 games in Boston, the series resumed after a travel day and a day off due to rain, so Phillippe had time to rest up for his second start in a row. The Pirates struck first in their half of the first inning as Ginger Beaumont singled and was replaced on base by Fred Clark after a fielder's choice. Consecutive singles by Hannes Wagner and Kitty Bransfield drove in Clark for the first run of the game. Pirates now up 1-0. Deacon Phillippe started out strong, allowing only 1 hit through the first 4 innings, and things were pretty quiet until the 5th overall, with the Pirates stranding 2 runners in the 3rd, otherwise not much else. Boston tied it up in the 5th after Candy LaChance singled and moved up on a ground out.
Candy LaChance is so cool. Like a mustache, dude.
LaChance then scored from second base on a single by catcher Lou Krieger and beat the throw at home plate from right fielder Jimmy Sebring to tie the score at 1. However, the Pirates answered back in the bottom half of the 5th after a triple by Ginger Beaumont and an RBI single by Tommy Leach. It's now 2-1 Pirates. The Pirates rallied in the 7th, beginning with singles by Deacon Phillippe and Ginger Beaumont, followed by a bases-clearing triple by Tommy Leach. Leach then scored on a Hannes Wagner single to make the score 5-1 Pittsburgh. Boston nearly made a comeback in the top of the 9th, when 3 singles in a row by Jimmy Collins, Chick Stahl, and Buck Freeman score a run. Freddie Parent then hits into a force out at second base, which allows Chick Stahl to score, making the score 5-3 Pittsburgh. 2 more singles by Candy LaChance and Hobie Ferris load the bases, and then pinch hitter Duke Farrell, batting for the catcher Krieger, launched a sacrifice fly to score Parent.
Oh, hell yeah, this guy looks awesome. Cool.
However, the next batter, another pinch hitter, Jack O'Brien, hitting for Dineen, popped up to second to end the game. Pittsburgh wins 5-4 in a close one with a near comeback by Boston, putting the Pirates up 3-1 in the series, with the next 3 scheduled to be played at home in Pittsburgh. A third complete game win for Deacon Philippi, the Pirates pitcher having an outstanding series so far. Things are looking dire for Boston going into Game 5. Game 5 of the 1903 World Series, the Boston Americans versus the Pittsburgh Pirates. Pirates are up 3-1 in the series heading into the second game at Exposition Park, Pittsburgh. The pitching matchup for the day featured a pair of 35-year-old veterans in Brickyard Kennedy for the Pirates and Cy Young once again for Boston. The crowd for this game was much bigger than the previous game at 12,300, including a large group of Boston fans known as the Royal Rooters who'd followed them all the way to Pittsburgh. The Rooters were known for annoying the opposition by singing a particular song called Tessie. They certainly look annoying. The overflow crowd led to a ground rule situation similar to Game 3 in Boston. This time the balls hit into the outfield, which rolled into a crowd held back by a simple rope, were ruled a ground rule triple. As you can imagine, this is going to create some chaos in the base paths. This one starts off as a pitching duel, as Kennedy and Young dominated for 5 scoreless innings before Boston broke out in the 6th. The top of the inning was a nightmare for the Pirates. It started when Chick Stahl reached on an error by Pirates outfielder and manager Fred Clark, followed by a single by Buck Freeman. Shortstop Freddie Parent bunted into a fielder's choice, but an error by legendary shortstop Hannes Wagner on the catch loaded the bases. Candy LaChance immediately walked to score the first Boston run, and then Hobie Ferris hit into another fielder's choice at short, leading to a second error in this inning by Wagner, which scored the second and third runs. Boston's dealt out 3-0. The remaining runners moved up on a bunt, and consecutive triples by pitchers Cy Young and Patsy Doherty drove in the next 3. It's 6-0 Boston at the end of the inning. None of these runs were earned. In the 7th inning, consecutive singles by Buck Freeman, Freddie Parent, and Hobie Ferris score another run for Boston. This is followed by a bases-loaded walk to catcher Lou Krieger to score another run and effectively put Brickyard Kennedy in another jam. Another 2 runs scored on a ground out, and then Patsy Doherty hit another ground rule triple to drive in 2 more runs. The score's 10-0 Boston, and we have an official blowout. In the 8th inning, manager Fred Clark relieved pitcher Brickyard Kennedy with a rookie named Gus Thompson, who'd only had 5 games experience in the majors up to this point. Boston tacked on another run after a triple by Chick Stahl, who then scored on a ground out by Buck Freeman, making the score 11-0 Boston. The Pirates got their only runs of the game in the 8th when Ginger Beaumont singled and Fred Clark reached on an error by Boston shortstop Freddie Parent. That's a former York County, Maine sheriff candidate, Freddie Parent. Both then scored on, you guessed it, a triple by Tommy Leach for 2 unearned, giving us a final score of 11-2 Boston. Cy Young with a nice pitching performance, 2 unearned runs on 6 hits, 4 strikeouts, no walks. This marks the first blowout in World Series history, with Boston winning by a large margin of 9 runs. Starting pitching is a huge question mark going into Game 6 for Pittsburgh. Who could start for them outside from Deacon Philippi at this point? They still hold on to a lead of 3-2 going into Game 6. Game 6 of the 1903 World Series at Exposition Park in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh Pirates leading the Boston Americans in the series 3-2 going into this one. The pitching matchup for the day featured Bill Dineen for the Boston Americans, and with ace Deacon Philippi still resting after 3 starts in the series, the Pirates go with Sam Lever to start his second game. Lever was still recovering from the shoulder injury from the trap shooting competition he competed in before the series. With Brickyard Kennedy beaten in the previous game and the remaining pitchers for the Pirates being rookies, Lever seemed to be the only choice at this point. Sam Lever did put up a couple 1-2-3 innings before getting in trouble in the 3rd. He managed to get 2 outs and then gave up a single to rival pitcher and future umpire Bill Dineen, and then a walk to Patsy Doherty. Consecutive singles by Jimmy Collins and Chick Stahl scored 2 runs. Stahl then swiped second base, and Buck Freeman reached on an error by Pirates third baseman Tommy Leach, which allowed the 3rd run to score and make the score 3-0 Boston. Lever got out of a jam in the 4th inning, stranding 3 runners despite 3 singles, but allowed 2 more runs in the 5th. Chick Stahl launched another triple and scored on a Buck Freeman sacrifice fly, and Freddie Parent was hit by a pitch and scored after a Hobie Ferris single drew an errant throw by Hannes Wagner to make the score 5-0 Boston. Boston picked up an insurance run in the 7th after another triple by Parent and a double by Candy LaChance to make the score 6-0. The Pirates managed to rally in the bottom half of the inning with consecutive singles by Jimmy Sebring and Ed Phelps, who then advanced on a groundout and came home on a Ginger Beaumont single to make the score 6-2 Boston. Manager Fred Clark moved the runner to 3rd with a double, and then Tommy Leach launched another sacrifice fly to cut the lead in half. Boston 6, Pirates 3. Despite a Clark steal of third and consecutive walks to Wagner and Bransfield, the rally ended when Claude Ritchie grounded into a force out at second, cutting the momentum short. The Pirates made one last effort in the ninth, getting their only hit of the game since the seventh inning on a Ginger Beaumont single, but Fred Clark lined into a double play to squash the momentum, and Dineen got the final batter to pop out to end the game. A second consecutive win for the Boston Americans by a score of 6-3. Bill Dineen spreading out 10 hits for only 3 earned runs on the mound for Boston. After coming to Pittsburgh down 3-1, the Boston Americans now have the series tied at 3 games apiece heading into the final game in Pittsburgh. Game 7 of the 1903 World Series in Pittsburgh, Boston American versus the Pittsburgh Pirates. The series is tied at 3 games apiece, but this is not the final game of the series, as this one is scheduled to be a best of 9. That seems like a lot of games. We got a rematch of Game 1 on the mound today with Cy Young versus Deacon Phillippe. This is the 4th start of the series for Phillippe in 7 games. A rainout on October 9th allowed an extra day of rest for Phillippe, which I'm sure Pirates manager Fred Clark was very grateful for. Boston jumped on Phillippe for 2 runs in the first inning on consecutive triples by Jimmy Collins and Chick Stahl, followed by a fielder's choice off the bat of Buck Freeman to second base, which forced an error by the Pittsburgh catcher and allowed Chick Stahl to score. The 4th inning featured even more ground rule triples for Boston. Buck Freeman had a triple and then scored on a Freddie Parent groundout, and then Hobie Ferris followed it with another triple and scored on a single by catcher Lou Krieger. The score is now Boston 4, Pirates 0. The Pirates answered in the bottom of the 4th with a triple of their own by Kitty Bransfield, who then scored on a Claude Ritchie groundout to make the score 4-1 Boston. In the 6th inning, Freddie Parent hit a single and Candy LaChance reached on an error by Phillippe on a bunt. Hobie Ferris followed up with a bunt of his own to move both runners forward, and Lou Krieger came through with a couple more RBIs on a single to make the score Boston 6, Pirates 1. In the bottom half of the 6th, Fred Clark hit, you guessed it, another triple and then scored on another sacrifice bunt, this time by Hannes Wagner, to make the score 6-2 Boston. The Boston Americans had another run in the 8th on a triple by Freddie Parent, who scored on a wild pitch by Deacon Phillippe to make the score 7-2 Boston. The Pirates made one last effort in the 9th inning when consecutive singles by Jimmy Sebring, Ed Phelps, and Deacon Phillippe scored Sebring, but Cy Young put down the next 3 batters to make the final score 7-3 Boston. Cy Young spreading out 10 hits over 9 innings for only 3 earned runs, very similar to Bill Dineen in the previous game. A fine performance by Cy Young in what will be his only World Series. After coming to Pittsburgh down 3-1, the Boston Americans have pulled ahead 4-3, heading back to the final game scheduled in Boston. It's a best of 9 series, so this thing could go 2 more games. Game 8, the final game of the 1903 World Series. The Boston Americans coming into the series leading the Pittsburgh Pirates 4-3 in this best of 9 as it returns to the Huntington Avenue baseball grounds in Boston for the remainder of the series. The game was played in front of a relatively small crowd of 7,400, so a bit less than some of the previous games in Boston. The pitching matchup for the day featured Bill Dineen for the Boston Americans, and starting for the 5th time in the series for Pittsburgh, Deacon Phillippe. A travel day plus a rainout on the 12th pushed the game back to the 13th of October, which allowed Phillippe a second consecutive start. This would be Boston's 5th look at Phillippe, so is he still going to be effective here? It all started off promising enough with Phillippe holding Boston scoreless on 2 hits until the 4th inning, while the Pirates remained completely hitless until the 4th. The Pirates started to rally on the top half of the 4th inning when Tommy Leach drew a walk and went to third on a Hannes Wagner single. But an attempt at a double steal went wrong as Tommy Leach was caught coming home to end the inning. Tommy Leach seen here in the 1950s game show I've Got a Secret. Yeah, it's kind of hard to find 8 games worth of pictures of guys that played in 1903. Boston scored first in the bottom half of the inning when Buck Freeman tripled and Freddie Parent reached on an error by catcher Ed Phelps on a weak hit in front of the plate. Hey, Freddie Parent on the same episode of I've Got a Secret as Tommy Leach. A nice little 1903 World Series reunion on this game show. Candy LaChance bunted the runner to second while Freeman remained on third, and then both runners came in on a single by Hobie Ferris to make the score 2-0 Boston. Pittsburgh blew another chance to score in the top of the 6th. Pitcher Deacon Phillippe hit a single but was picked off at first base in a strikeout pick-off double play combo. Phillippe seen here reminiscing with Hannes Wagner about the World Series days. Boston added another run in the bottom of the 6th when Candy LaChance hit a triple and Hobie Ferris drove in his 3rd run of the game to make the score Boston 3, Pittsburgh 0. And this ends up being the final score with Hobie Ferris driving in all 3 runs in the final game to make him the RBI leader in the series for Boston, with 6 or 7 depending on what part of baseball reference you're looking at. The final 3 innings of the game remained hitless for both teams as the Boston Americans take their first ever World Series 5-3. Bill Dineen with 4 complete games for Boston on a 2.06 ERA for a 3-1 record in the series. For Pittsburgh, Deacon Phillippe throwing an unbelievable 5 complete games. The Pirates were relying entirely on Phillippe for quality pitching pitching in the series. Cy Young with an ERA of 1.85 and 3 complete games in his only World Series appearance. And yes, Cy Young appeared on I've Got a Secret as well. These segments are all available on YouTube. Check these old guys out. It's really cool. The Senior League starts out strong, but the Pirates are ultimately undone by their lack of pitching in the first World Series. The Boston Americans are the world's champions of baseball for 1903 and win the first ever World Series in 8 games. An exciting moment for the young American League, only 3 years into their existence. Boston will win the American League pennant again in 1904, but unfortunately no series will be played due to a boycott by the National League. But we will be back in 1905 with the second World Series.